Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut, where AARP staff and volunteers engage with Connecticut decision makers about policies and programs that matter to older residents. I'm John Erlingheuser, Senior Director of Advocacy and Community Outreach at AARP Connecticut, and I'm delighted today to be joined by one of our outstanding AARP Connecticut volunteers, John Wilson. So, John, thanks for being with us this morning. And would you like to share a little bit about your role at AARP and tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
I've been an active AARP volunteer in Connecticut for about 5 years now. I do a lot of work in the fraud space, both within the state, where I go around the state educating people on how to avoid becoming victims of fraud. I'm also active in the national scene, where I spend time talking to victims of fraud, helping them either recover their money or recover their peace of mind, which is very often shattered when they become a victim. I'm also the volunteer state president, which means I coordinate what's happening with our 250 volunteers, work with John and the other staff members as a liaison between the staff and the volunteers. So I keep myself fairly busy.
Well, and we really do appreciate all that you do, and you're a very great representative of the over 200 volunteers that we have in the state that are actually the movers and shakers of things that happen and help the staff get things done. So I do appreciate it. Now, it's also my pleasure to welcome our very special guest this morning, and that's Connecticut State Senate Minority Leader Stephen Harding, who represents the 30th Senate District. So, Minority Leader Harding, thank you for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. And can you tell us maybe a little bit about your background outside the legislature? We'll have a lot of time in the call to talk about all of the legislative stuff, but what your background is, and then maybe tell us what towns you do represent in the 30th Senate District.
First off, I just want to say to both you, John and John, thank you for having me, number one, and thank you for all that you do. I mean, AARP is a great organization in the state. I know many of constituents of mine, family of mine, are members. They appreciate the great services that AARP provides them, and I also appreciate AARP's great lobbying effort in Hartford on behalf of the seniors in this state, which is critically important. So when I am able to speak those that represent AARP up at the Capitol, I always take into mind their concerns, their considerations, their proposals, because keeping our seniors here in this beautiful state, making sure that they're safe and the state is as affordable as possible to them is a critical goal to mine. And I also happen to represent a district in the 30th Senate District that is populated with many, many seniors. So I have a fortunate opportunity to advocate for many of them when I'm up in Hartford representing the 30th District. But John, to your question, I have been in the legislature now for essentially a decade. I got elected when I was in my late 20s as a state rep, and I remember working with you, John, in my role as a state representative, and then was elected to the state senate in 2022, and then became minority leader in 2024. So it's been a great ride. It's been very interesting being in the legislature. But outside the legislature, I'm a very typical father in Connecticut. I have two beautiful children, ages 7 and 5. And they drive me nuts at time and drive me all over the town and the community. But I love them to death, and I'm my son's football and baseball coach, and my daughter is very involved in dance and gymnastics. So a very active, fun family life is what's going on in my home, and so yeah, that's outside of that, and then also outside of my job as the minority leader and a state senator for the 30th district is I'm a lawyer by trade. And so I do a lot of actually estate planning and probates and wills and trusts. And so in the role, I understand inherently, doing that professionally, what many senior citizens think of when they're in their later years in life about planning for their future generations and how to ensure that their children, their grandchildren, their nieces, nephews, etc., are able to hopefully get something in the end for their hard work that they've put in while they're here with us. And estate planning is very important to them, and I understand the intricacies and regulations surrounding that. And those are sometimes some of the things that I'm able to speak with AARP about. So that's my life outside the legislature, and as much as I get involved up there, it seems I get limited in terms of the time outside, because I'm often up in Hartford so much
Yeah.
with what's going on.
Well, we appreciate that, and we appreciate that background that you have because it does prove valuable into the work that we all jointly do in Hartford. So, hey, John, yeah, I'll turn it over to you for the next question.
Senator, you hold a very key leadership role as a minority leader. of the state Senate. Could you explain what that role entails and what responsibilities come with it so that we all understand a little more
Yeah.
about what you do?
John, it's a great question, and I often get it because it's really the intricate details of the Capitol in terms of a position that you have, even just outside of your regular Senate role. But I have the fortunate opportunity to be the leader of the Senate Republican caucus, and that's what it means to be the minority leader in the Senate. And so I lead the caucus, and that means working with valuable staff that we have in our caucus that work for our senators and myself, as well as collaborating with the senators that are in my caucus. There's 11 of us in the minority in the state Senate, and we all work really well together. And my job is to try to, lead us into a certain direction together with all the different personalities that we have, which at times can be challenging depending on what the issues are, because we all care about very much about our district. So our district sometimes view things through a different lens. And so my job is to kind of collaborate as best we can together as a team. And it's also to take the positions of all the individual senators that are in my caucus and bring those issues in advocacy, in policy for our caucus, in negotiations with lobbying groups, advocacy groups, the governor's office, our counterparts on the other party in the state Senate, and leadership in the House of Representatives as well. As you know, Government 101 is to get anything done legislatively, you got to go through both the House and Senate chamber and then get it signed into law by the governor. And so that takes a lot of collaboration of different aspects of our legislative government. And, my job as a minority leader is to take those aspects, negotiate them, and make sure the legislation that is important to us and our constituents ultimately get finalized in the end with negotiations and discussions with all the offices of not only legislative government, but state government as a whole.
That's so important and really leads right into my next question because AARP, we're a nonpartisan organization and we work
Right.
with members on both sides of the political aisle, and we've certainly worked closely with you and members of your caucus, and we're proud of the achievements that we had for older residents in 2025. So what are some of the issues like in this past legislative session before we talk about the future that your caucus is really proud of that you feel we've achieved for residents in Connecticut?
So one of them is starting to tackle this public benefit charge that's on your electric bills. One of the biggest issues that I hear from senior citizens throughout our state and throughout my district is, the Connecticut is an unaffordable state. We're the third in the country. It's a beautiful state to live in, and many senior citizens desperately want to stay here because for many, this is the place where they've moved into their home. They've raised their children here. They're now seeing their grandchildren getting raised in the same local community, and they desperately want to stay for obvious reasons. And my parents are now senior citizens, and they want the same thing. They want to stay, but Connecticut, despite being a great state, is unaffordable for the most part compared to other states. So we need to tackle that. And so we've made some small steps towards tackling affordability. And as I mentioned, this public benefit charge that's baked into your electric cost and is quite regressive and hits senior citizens quite hard. So I was happy that in this last legislative session that we were able to start to reduce that public benefit charge, therefore starting to reduce the electric bill for everyone in the state of Connecticut. And I know how positive that is for our senior citizens constituents throughout the state, as I mentioned. There was also some budget reforms as well in terms of oversight over how we spent our money. And because ultimately, the only way we're going to make our state more affordable, reduce taxes, reduce electric bills, is to be able to make sure that we're not wasting money, the hard-earned money that senior citizens and everyone sent up to the state of Connecticut. So we've provided some oversight in terms of waste in our government so that we can invest that money better, and also at the same exact time look at ways to reduce our spending so we can reduce some of that tax burden. Also, investing in municipalities is critical for senior citizens because I think I hear from many. I think the number one issue that I hear from senior citizens, frankly, is how high the property taxes are and the lack of relief in Connecticut for property taxes. For many of our senior citizens, they've been fortunate enough to pay down the debt on their home, but they still have the property taxes they have to pay, and they're on a fixed income. And what I hear from many senior citizens is, look, my income is fixed, but the property tax rate is not. And so it creates, quite a financial burden for the senior citizens in the state in that regard. And so we've made some more investments to municipalities. But as I've said, these are positive steps, but certainly not, end all be all accomplishments in
Right.
saying that, hey, we've fixed the issue, right? And so we still have a lot to look forward to in terms of being able to fix issues in our state for our seniors.
Well, and I'll say before John asks the next question that, we work very closely with your ranking member on the Energy and Technology Committee, Senator Fazio,
Yes, of course.
and he's always listened to ARP and take, we don't always agree, but he certainly, with his help,
Yes.
we were able to make some very important changes in energy policy in Connecticut over the last couple of years, and we're thankful for that. And we know working together, we're going to continue to drive down costs because you're so right that energy costs in particular, along with property taxes, are really drivers of what push seniors out of Connecticut as well as businesses and others. So we really appreciate the fact that you're making that a priority. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Senator Harding, what issues do the Senate Republicans plan to make a priority during this coming short 2026 legislative session, particularly those that would impact residents age 50 and older?
Great question. And it's a great follow-up to what we just talked about. As I said before, we've made some steps, but we certainly haven't reached a resolution in terms of addressing the issues that fully in full. So obviously, going back to the public benefit, we've made a step in reducing that bill. Senator Fazio has been absolutely critical in fighting for that and negotiating that bill into passage. But him and I have discussed at length that the fact that it's still not enough, and that the senior citizens and everyone throughout the state are still paying this very regressive tax that's being built into their energy charges. And so Senator Fazio and I will continue this session to work to hopefully at some point phase out or eliminate this public benefit charge, which could hopefully reduce many seniors' electric bills by hundreds of dollars a month, which is critical savings for them to ensure that they have money to remain in Connecticut and make it much more affordable for them. The other thing that has been really important as well to our caucus as it pertains to seniors and those 50 and older is, as I mentioned, property taxes. And part of that, and Senator Fazio has worked in accordance with me on it, we want to craft a plan that is going to provide full property tax relief to everyone throughout the state, and particularly to allow municipalities to craft laws that help seniors on property tax relief. Some towns don't aren't able by law, in fact, to provide as much relief as they want to towards their seniors. And so that has to be a focus of ours. Because I said before, energy is one thing, but what I hear time and time and time again from those 50 and older is just how difficult those property tax payments are and what a burden it can become, and in terms of affordability for them every year. And the other thing too, and you mentioned it, John, at the beginning of your discussion, which was glaring to me and eye-opening because it's something that I've been looking at myself and our caucus has as well, is scams that are going on, particularly those that are targeted towards seniors. We have to be able to work with our law enforcement, work with our state police to come up with a collaborative effort to stop this fraud, to provide better education to seniors and to all those, including their family members, on how this fraud works and how individuals are targeted and how to most importantly protect our seniors from these targeted attacks. I've unfortunately heard far too many stories, as I'm sure both you, John, and John, you've heard yourself, from men and women, particularly senior citizens, that get those phone calls for thinking that it's a grandchild that's in jail or needs quick money for whatever reason, and you're pulling at the heartstrings of senior citizens who will literally do anything. And I know with my own grandparents, and only have one of them left, unfortunately, that they will literally do anything for their family members, anything for their children, anything for their grandchildren. And it's so sad that there's sick people out there. And mean-spirited people out there that are targeting the fact that they know that these great men and women will do anything for their family, and they get that phone call, they get nervous, and their first reaction is, I need to do anything to help them. And it makes them very easy targets. And we have to find out a way to help prevent these targeted attacks? Because as you mentioned, John Wilson, you said that you've met with many of these family members, and sometimes the hardest thing is them just simply getting over being the victim of this and the victimization, how much it hurts emotionally. And that's totally understandable. And so we're looking forward as a caucus to working with the AARP as well as our state police and local police to come up with efforts to help reduce these terrible attacks.
Well, and I'll just say we've over the last several years, and we have ways to go, and fraud is going to be a big issue for ARP in 2026. But we've had some great strides working with your ranking member Senator Berthel
Yep.
and Representative Del Nicky from the House, as well as the chairs from the majority, on passing senior financial exploitation legislation and crypto fraud legislation, and we're certainly going to continue making those issues a priority. And I know we'll be
Right.
working closely with your team on that. So, along with those issues, we've worked with your folks on um, retirement income tax reform.
Yes.
We've also worked on bipartisan prescription drug reform this
Right.
past year. Um, do you, do you find, is there anything else that we haven't covered in that regard that you think we can partner with your caucus on at AARP to make a priority, something that's important to you folks that you think we would be helpful in trying to work with you on?
Yeah, no, one thing that, has is speaking in the vein that you spoke to, which is also critically important, is affordable health care to seniors or those that are 50 and over. I think particularly to those in the 50 to 70-year-old range, one thing that I think is critical that you could work with our caucus on, I would hope we can form a relationship and an advocacy point on this. Is associated healthcare plans, and so it's more targeted, I think, towards seniors or 50 and over that are currently working. Obviously, some as they get older retire. But it would really allow small businesses to be competitive in the healthcare market and offering affordable healthcare plans and health insurance plans and premiums that are collaborative and provide a lot of great services at an affordable rate to insurance to not only seniors but to everyone that works at these small employers. So what it does is it essentially allows these small businesses to collaborate collectively together and to offer a larger plan collectively as opposed to being forced to offer unaffordable healthcare premiums as just one individualized small business. Obviously, you obfuscate the cost and the risks in terms of healthcare insurance when you group a larger group of people together. And I think that that's exactly what this would do. I think it would really bring a great affordability step towards those trying to pay very expensive health insurance. And in some cases, for some of these health insurance plans, you have those that are 50 and over that are paying a lot of money, very high premiums, and not getting much healthcare services covered in return. And as you hit the older ages, it's just unfortunately an aspect of life. You're going to have more health issues. And so, for those that are seniors or 50 and over that are currently working, and those that might be working in small businesses, I think this would be a very critical thing for them.
And that's important, and I know healthcare is, as I say, a critical issue, particularly when you get to that 50 and older age group. So we'll certainly be looking forward to addressing healthcare reform with you as well as many of the other issues. And let me ask you just one more question, and then I know John will have one to kind of wrap things up. But is there anything else that from your career as a legislator, personally, either that you're proud of that you've achieved over the time in the legislature in the House or the Senate, or that's a personal priority of yours, maybe not necessarily in your role as leader that you want to talk a little bit about that maybe we haven't covered?
Of course. No, I think one thing is I was a huge proponent of phasing out the taxes on Social Securities and pensions when I was in the House of Representatives, and as it pertains to things that I'm proud of in advocating for and seeing it ultimately to its success. That has to be number one, particularly as it pertains to those that are 50 and over, because as I mentioned before, many of those individuals, particularly those in their 60s and up, that's their only income is their anything they may have saved in a pension or a trust plan or a retirement plan, and then also obviously Social Security. So that's probably the number one thing as it pertains to seniors. Um, And I also would say that, we were able to craft and a bipartisan budget. And when I speak, particularly those that are seniors that have seen the evolution of American government over the years, they've seen less and less bipartisanship. And many of the seniors say, look, I look back at a period of time when it seemed like Republican and Democrat wasn't all that different, and it didn't bring out the divisiveness. And they look back to that period in time in our country, and they envy it. They want to see it once again restored. Bipartisanship is a huge aspect of the AARP. I'm proud to say that you work with both Democrat and Republicans in a very collaborative way, and you bring a lot of us together on some issues we wouldn't otherwise be working together on. And so I was proud to support a bipartisan budget
Right.
that multiple Republicans and Democrats came together and voted for a critical budget that cut spending and down the road put measures in that provided middle class income tax relief, and it still provides really strong fiscal guardrails for our state that ultimately offer, I think, making the state a little more unaffordable, excuse me, a little more affordable every single day. And so those are two things I look back in my legislative career that I was very proud to be a part of, and I think that it produced really positive results for seniors and frankly everyone across our state.
Well, and I'll just say, when it comes to the retirement tax, because that's an issue I've worked on, and been with ARP 22 years, and we would get more contact from people about that issue than
Yeah,
anything else.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
well, people look at older residents and they say, well, they're not, they're retired, they're not producing anymore. The irony of it is when when we keep people that are retired in the state of Connecticut, they actually contribute more to the economy than they take out of it,
Yes.
because the money that we're now allowing them to keep in their hands is going out into the economy to pay the expenses of living. And not to mention, we have a very high cost state, as you pointed out. And so it's critical to have that economic driver, and the spending that occurs when we allow senior citizens to keep that retirement income that they've earned. So your
So,
caucus and the House Republican caucus were drivers of that, and then we ended up getting it to be a bipartisan thing. But we've always been very appreciative of it, and I know that our members and retirees across the state are very appreciative of that. John, why don't you wrap us up with your last question?
AARP volunteers have actively testified before the General Assembly and continue to be engaged in the legislative process. I had the opportunity this past session to testify on a crypto bill, which passed the legislature and is now one of the strongest crypto bills in the country. Could you share how the public can stay informed about the work of the General Assembly and how they can participate both during and outside of the session?
absolutely. Great question. And that pertains to everybody, right? And not only seniors, but I mean, it's a
Of
question
course.
I get all the time, and it's a great question because we need folks to be engaged in our democracy. So it's critically important. And we need to hear all voices in terms of legislation that is on the board and it is in front of a public hearing. One is if you're online, if your computer, is working and up and you enjoy getting on it. For most part, we're in a generation now where young and old are pretty computer savvy, which is great. You can go to cga.ct.gov, and that's generally the Connecticut legislative website, as John and John, you both know. And you can really search around and you can see when public hearings are, what bills have been proposed. And it also gives you really good insight into how to email a legislator. There's also a tool in there called Find Your Legislator. Oftentimes, people live busy lives, right? And so they might know who their congressperson is. They obviously know who their senators are and governor. But oftentimes, leading a busy life and not getting involved in every governmental issue necessarily, some people don't know their state senator and state rep, and that's okay. And that's exactly the reason why there's a tool on the government website that I just mentioned, where it's called Find Your Legislator. And you just literally type in your address, and right there it pops up every representative that you have, from state rep to state senate to U.S. Senate to Congress. And so it also gives you a link to click on them and email them. And I can tell you from my own personal perspective that when I get an email on a particular issue from a constituent, I always read it, I always take it to heart, I always consider it, and I respond back. And I can tell you, so it's even more important than when you email a chair of a particular committee or just a random U.S., not U.S., but state senator or state rep. It's still important to do. But what's even more impactful, if you truly believe in a particular issue, is to reach out to your state senator, your state rep, because I can tell you that every single one of them, Democrat or Republican, they're going to care, they're going to read it, and they're going to get back to you because ultimately you're the one that could vote them in or vote them out. So they don't have much of a choice. They're your boss. You're their boss, I should say. So, please look into that website. Please look into emailing, and it also gives you a phone number if you want to call their office if that's easier for you. And so I think that that's what I have to say about, being engaged in our democracy here in Connecticut. It's easier to do than most people think.
Well, we appreciate that. And, I always tell our volunteers that all the time. So I always appreciate when people of authority reinforce what
I don't know how
I
much
say
authority I
because
have, but I
well, you
appreciate
have
you
a lot
saying
more
that,
than me,
John.
Senator. Well, I do appreciate it. And, we're kind of wrapping it up. So, Senator, anything you want to just impart us with before we do wrap up?
Yeah, it really just please stay engaged with AARP. If you're not part of the organization, please consider joining it. As I said before, it's one of the great advocacy organizations we're fortunate to have up in Hartford. They really look out for the seniors of this state or those that are 50 and up, and they really get behind a lot of awesome policies, good policies that will make your life better here in Connecticut. I love working with them, and I hope to continue to work with all of you throughout the future sessions ahead.
Well, we do appreciate it. And I know we'll be working closely with you and members of your caucus in the upcoming session. And we do appreciate you being willing to be a guest here. And we appreciate always that you're accessible to your constituents and to our volunteers and members. So with that, I'm going to just close us out by saying thank you to all of you for tuning in to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut. Be sure to join us for future episodes and catch past ones on demand right here on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. Want to make a difference? You can scan the QR code to become an AARP e-advocate and help us advance policies that matter to the Connecticut 50 plus community. Thank you all and have a great rest of your week.